Hello, Colorado Realtors. I'm Scott Peterson. Thank you for joining me for another edition, a quarantine edition, of course, of Legal Bites. I realized just before I hit record here, I've got this, it looks almost like a prison shirt on or something. And it wasn't intentional, but it does sort of feel appropriate based on how I think a lot of us are starting to feel these days. So this is Monday the 27th, Monday morning the 27th, the day you've all been waiting for in many respects, because as you guys know, yesterday at midnight, or last night at midnight, the stay-at-home statewide order expired, and now we are living under the safer-at-home statewide order. And so I'm going to talk about that and some other issues that have come up over the last couple of days, a lot of confusion. So let me start with the statewide order. So I know I had some people email me and send me messages through other social media saying, hey, you said you'd be right back out as soon as we got the executive order, which came yesterday, kind of mid to late afternoon, Sunday. And I'm not opposed to jumping on here and doing something on Sunday, but what was in the actual statewide executive order itself was not terribly substantive and didn't really provide any insight. What it did tell me, though, is that we were going to be getting something today, which we did, and that is a public health order that had been given by the CDPHE, which is the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And so in the executive order for Safer at Home that was issued yesterday, only a couple pages long, didn't even speak specifically to real estate at all. They referred to the fact that the CDPHE was essentially charged with providing a public health order today that was going to clarify all of the details, the dirty little details. So that's what came about an hour and a half ago, I think, roughly. And so I've spent a little bit of time looking at that and breaking it down, and I'm going to give you what I can out of that. So the first, and this order is going to be linked below. We'll make sure it's on the YouTube page, and hopefully we'll push it out with Facebook posts and everything else. So you'll be able to download this. It's 30-some pages long, but there's a couple of really operative sections specifically to our industry that I'm going to discuss and that I'll direct you guys to. The first area is paragraph 2E. Paragraph 2E in very bottom of page 5 as you look at the report. And so what we're using this nomenclature now of field services, which I like, and I think it clarifies. So what it says here is all field services, including real estate, so we got a specific shout out, may resume operations in accordance with the requirements of this order, including Appendix B. And so I'm going to go there next, but real estate includes in-person real estate showings and marketing services, which must adhere to social distancing requirements with cleaning and disinfection between each showing, but may not have open houses. So let's just stop there for a second, and that's all it says. That's for field services. And so real estate includes showings and marketing services. So that's good because, as we know, under the last interpretation of real estate transactions by the Attorney General's office in the state of Colorado, real estate transactions did not include marketing services. Here they specifically call out that it does. So that's a good thing, and I think it's pretty expansive in terms of showings. Absolutely not open houses, but would also include real estate photography and staging and some of those other things, which I think broadly would all fall under the field services category. Field services are, people who aren't working from home, they're working out in the field and engaging, in not in an office space, but outside, in this case at somebody's home or residence. So anyhow, the other thing out of that first paragraph that I want to just chat about for a second is you've got to adhere to social distancing requirements, and we know what those are at this point, I hope, but with cleaning and disinfection between each showing. So that is an interesting sort of affirmative obligation that I think is being placed, right? I know is being placed on our industry. And what that would include, I think, would be in the case of having a showing. Obviously, it has to be one at a time. You can't have overlapping showings. You couldn't have any of those things. But after a showing concludes, then somebody is supposed to, according to this, go and sort of clean and disinfect surfaces, wipe down surfaces. And so if you're a listing broker, I think, ultimately you've got to figure out if your seller is going to be comfortable performing that task after a buyer and buyer's agent leaves a property. If the seller is going to be willing to go and wipe down things, if in the case of a vacant house, I think you're going to have to arrange for that. It's either going to be the listing broker is going to go over and actually clean and disinfect. You maybe would be putting in the showing notes with the buyer's agent, that the buyer's agent can perform the showing, close the showing, go back in and do the clean and disinfectant thing to be compliant. So how you accomplish that is going to be take a bit of coordination on your part. As listing brokers, buyer's agents, whatever you're doing, you do have to figure that piece out. So be mindful of that expectation. And then what it does is it refers us to Appendix B. And Appendix B is specifically related to field services. And this is a sort of a laundry list of items, now not specific to real estate, but this is the obligations and expectations on, they say, employers must implement the following measures regarding employees to minimize disease transmission. So this is employers of field service personnel. Now, I know some of you guys are going to ask the question, well, brokers, they're, primarily independent contractors and they're not employees. I wouldn't play around with that distinction between independent contractor and employee. I think if you're an employing broker and you have broker associates, then the sort of list of expectations that are contemplated by, let's see, there's 9 or 10 of them here, 10 of them here, essentially, that you will be required to make sure that your broker associates are adhering to when they are performing any of their field services. And so that's going to take some coordination maybe with your office's attorney or managing, office's management to develop some of these. I'm just going to touch on a couple of them that I think are a little bit interesting. Obviously, making sure that your employees, your independent contractors in this case, are adhering to the rules and guidance on social gathering limitations, comply with social distancing requirements, requiring masks or providing masks and gloves for any consumer interaction or work being done in third-party home or office spaces. So I think what that looks for if you're an employing broker is you're mandating that if your broker associates are performing any field services or engaging with their clients while they're performing field services at showings and such, that everybody has masks and gloves, however those get there. If they have to come from the broker associate to their clients, needs to be done that way. But that is seems like a little bit of a heightened obligation from just sort of maintaining masks and gloves for yourself. That does contemplate customer interactions done in third-party home or office spaces. So keep that in mind. There's another thing in here that is interesting, which is implement procedures for field-based employees to monitor for symptoms and to report in on management or report in to management daily on health status. That's the concept of a large brokerage firm having, 150 brokers send their temperature every day to the employing broker. That could be overwhelming. I think, developing some sort of policy, and that is that if a independent contractor or employee is having symptoms that obviously they're not allowed to show homes or do anything. And if they've shown a home and their temperature rises, at some point within a couple of day period after that showing, then they need to, notify you in writing via email, something like that. So you're not getting, 2 or 3 check-ins a day from every one of your broker associates to tell you that their temperature is normal. But developing some policies, I might encourage you guys to think a little bit critically about how you're going to implement that for your independent contractor / employees. Maintaining a detailed log of customer interactions to enable contact tracing if becomes necessary. The log should include the name, date, and location of contact, as well as the contact's phone number and or email address. So this is, I think, through the showing organization, your different showing schedulers, some of that stuff is going to be available, but anyhow, those are some of the, what I'll call like additional bars that, and they do put this on employers to implement for employees. And again, read that to read, employing brokers over their independent contractors, because I guarantee you that's the intention here. And so as a brokerage firm, you guys are going to need to be thinking hopefully with your broker counsel or management staff or however it is, how you're going to be complying or ensuring that your independent contractors comply with Appendix B. But the good news is that statewide showings are back on. And I will say it one more time. This can be modified just like the last one does to more narrowly constrict what occurs. And so to the extent that this is being seen or marketed as, we're back in business as usual and this kind of hooey, it's not. So, I'll leave that there. The next thing I'm going to talk about pretty quickly is now what I literally think that hotline shift from 9 to 12, which I covered this morning, was the busiest shift I've ever had. In fact, I'm certain it was. I stopped counting calls at some point, but it was close to 50, maybe just over 50. And the vast majority of them were related to, can I do showings? I'm in one of these counties that have latched on to the old governor's order, and they're trying to reference that. I'm going to just tell you guys what my thoughts are on that. The answer is I don't exactly know. My belief is that the governor's order, and I think I kind of alluded to this in the last Legal Bites, the governor's order refers to real estate transactions. And the interpretation under the governor's order of the governor's order as it applied to the state of Colorado by the Attorney General's office, who was responsible for enforcing the old governor's order, was that showings were not included. Every one of these counties that are now referencing the governor's order, they are ultimately going to be responsible for reviewing, enforcing, clarifying, interpreting what a real estate transaction is. As has been Carr's position from the beginning, a real estate transaction begins at a listing when you engage in a brokerage relationship with a client, a customer, or a client or consumer. And that real estate transaction runs through the marketing phases, including showings, all the way through to closing and delivery of possession of the property. That is a real estate transaction. At least the state AGs, as it relates to the state order, did not agree with that. To the extent that a county is trying to sort of latch onto the state order, it is not the AG's opinion that controls. It would be the specific county, whether it's a county attorney, county commissioner, public health or county health agency, city attorney, whoever it is that's appropriate, is ultimately for each county that has latched on to the state order by reference for interpreting what a real estate transaction is within that specific county. And so we do know that Boulder County, as an example, they attach the governor's order, but they have also specifically provided for showings. Denver County has latched onto the state's order, yet in their FAQs on their own city and county website, they refer to the fact that showings and closings are acceptable. And so there's some clarification on a county-by-county basis, but there's a number of counties, particularly in the Metro Denver area, that have not fully clarified what their position is. To be very honest, I think with the now safer at home implications related to showings and this requirement in terms of no overlapping showings, as well as sanitizing and disinfecting between showings and all of that, with all of that, I think the showing thing is because that would still control at a minimum statewide, even in a county that had something different. So if you're going to have a showing, you've still got to adhere to the state's level of expectation with regard to that heightened level of sanitation. I think that's a pretty darn good way of administering a pretty high standard for cleanliness in between showings. So anyhow, I can't answer the question. We've got 64, I think, counties in the state. Don't hold me to that. I'll be very embarrassed if it's not, but I think it's 64 counties in the state. And Carr is overseen, or not overseen, but our jurisdiction is all of them. And so it's hard to try and interpret on a one-off basis what individual cities or counties might be doing. And that's where I'm struggling to a large degree. Plus, for a number of those counties, there just has not been explicit clarification. So, hopefully that gives you guys something to think about in that regard. The last thing I want to mention is the buyer. I've had questions about how many buyers can be in a property. So if you're a buyer's agent, you're going to take in the buyer. Carr had originally proposed the governor's office say 3 people total, would presumably include a buyer, and then maybe a buyer, 2 buyers that might be ultimately signing the contract. They didn't clarify that in any specific regard in terms of total numbers. They did have a conference call on that I participated in on Saturdays. The governor's office did, and the governor's specific attorney, she referred to the buyer would be certainly a very limited sort of critical number of people. And the quote that a note that I made that was quoted here was people within the same household. So, this isn't, bring grandma and grandpa and bring in, siblings and friends and everybody else to see the house that you're thinking about putting a contract on. This is very narrowly and strictly interpreted within, people in terms of one house that are already naturally quarantining essentially together, presumably. And so while there's not a specific limitation, once again, the bad behavior kind of stuff that would elicit a complaint or further investigation into things could absolutely lose all of this for everybody. So please keep that in mind as you're doing any of these activities. And I'll tell you, hotline is available for some additional guidance. We're really struggling with call volume and just trying to stay on top of that. And specifically questions related to, I'm in this county or that county or this county or that county. Can I do that? I think you need to be looking specifically for limitations that may have been imposed specifically by your county and their specific interpretation, to the extent that they're actually using the governor's order, the county specific interpretation, of what a real estate transaction includes. And trust me, I think for everybody's purposes of getting sort of about their business with a high level of maturity and social distancing and best practices and adhering to the disinfecting between showings and all of that stuff, I am hopeful that most counties will acknowledge the incredible economic important aspects of this, not just to the economy as a whole, but to individual buyers and sellers who are really being hamstrung by this. And then, of course, for you guys in getting active in a practical manner with regard to your chosen profession. So I'll leave that there today. I hope this helps, and take care of yourselves. And I will be back, I'm sure, in the next day or two with another quarantine edition of Legal Bites. This, by the way, the haircut was Thursday, and it's been canceled because I'm in Denver. So anyhow, I'm starting to embrace it. Hopefully everybody else is as well. Take care, guys. Thanks again.